Right, welcome to our last meeting of 2021. And I think we've started recording. Yeah, good, thank you. So I've got apologies for absence, but I'm not absolutely sure if this is accurate. So if you are here and I read your name out, can you shout, please? Got councillors Eddie, Hopkinson, May, Tucker, and James Mason, who's our independent person. So,
Councillor Hopkinson is now here.
right, okay. Cross you off the list.
But we don't have Councillor Goggin as yet, who has accepted. Right. So Councillor Jacobs, Councillor Payne and Councillor Goggin, yes? Are those the three that we're missing?
Yeah, I think so. Right, anybody aware of any apologies from those people? Okay. Right. Okay.
Chair Stephen CFO is currently delving into a strategic coordinating group around COVID. So
Okay.
he'll be a few days
Okay. Right, so, yeah, Steve Imrie is on a call about COVID, so he'll be joining us later. Right, in that case, CFO is going to confirm procedures for emergency evacuation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Is it too early to say season's greetings? Don't think so, so season's greetings. So welcome, JTC today, Joint Training Centre. There is not a fire alarm test due today. If the fire alarm does go off, leave the building by the nearest available safe exit, and we will congregate out in the car park where we'll take a roll call. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And please, if you do speak at any point, can you use the microphones? It's in quite a large room and it would be difficult to hear everybody, and we also need it for the recording. So it's just I think it seems to be the green button in front of you. I'm not sure what the other one does, but use the green one. Right, in that case, declarations of interest. I think I'm handing over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. I have one item for declaration of interest, and that regards the item relating to the independent review of member allowances, item 10. There are two interpretations of the regulations I've discovered. Our neighbouring fire service, Devon and Somerset, regard any conversations about your member allowances as not being disclosable pecuniary interests, and therefore you don't need to make a declaration to discuss that paper and vote on it. However, some of your unitary authorities do regard member allowances as disclosable pecuniary interests, and therefore their monitoring officers grant a dispensation to members so that they can discuss and vote on that paper. So in the light of those two very different interpretations, I'm going to err on the side of caution, and I'm going to grant to you all today dispensation so that you can all discuss and vote on that paper 10 regarding member allowances. So just for the minutes, I'm granting dispensation under section 33(2)A of the Localism Act 2011. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I think we've been joined by a couple more councillors while you were speaking. So
I think we've got Councillor Payne now for the minutes and Councillor Goggin.
That's right.
Sorry I'm late, Chair.
Okay, public access. We received a late public access statement, didn't we?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So for public access, none were received by the deadline of Friday, the 10th of December, last Friday. However, the Director of Corporate Services received a public access statement by email from Amanda Mills, who is the Avon Fire Brigades Union Secretary, at 10:30 hours on Monday, the Monday just gone, the 13th of December. That is therefore a late public access statement, and it concerns the pension immediate detriment issue that we will be discussing at paper 13. I have discussed this with your chair, and we have decided that I will read that late public access statement to members today, as the chair regards it as helpful for members to have all information available before discussing that paper. However, I have been asked to stress on behalf of the chair that these are exceptional circumstances and that public access statements will not usually be accepted late and must be received by giving written notice to myself as your clerk at least 2 clear working days in advance of any meeting. So this is an exceptional circumstance. So if I now read that public access statement, it says, "To whom it may concern," and it is signed by Amanda Mills, the Avon Fire Brigade Union Secretary. "I'm writing in support of the agenda item 13, Immediate Detriment, LGA and FBU Memorandum of Understanding and Framework Update. In 2018, the Fire Brigade Union won a legal victory over the discrimination contained within the arrangements for transition from the 1992 Firefighters Pension Scheme to the 2015 CARE Scheme. Since this date, there have been a significant number of retirements due to age, length of service, and ill health. These retired people have, in many cases, been on a much reduced pension due to the detrimental provisions of the 2015 CARE Scheme, when compared to the provisions of the 1992 FPS. The full legal remedy following the judicial decision may not be implemented until October 2023, when all mechanisms for pension calculation, etc., have been implemented. Due to this extended time period, the FBU has sought to expedite access to the correct pension on retirement prior to the full remedy date. This process is known as immediate detriment. This negotiation has culminated in the Memorandum of Understanding between the FBU and the Local Government Association. The FBU are seeking approval by Avon Fire Authority to adopt the MOU in full, to enable people to retire with their full entitlement. The withdrawal of the Home Office guidance has no impact on the MOU. We urge you to approve the MOU. And that's the end of the public access statement.
Thank you. So I'll move on to Chair's business next, and welcome again to our meeting. And I can confirm that the Avon Fire Authority meeting is taking place as a face-to-face meeting. But unfortunately, due to the continuing prevalence of COVID-19, we continue to have room capacity restrictions, and we have had to limit the number of attendees and the entry of press and public. For this reason, we are recording this meeting for the public to view. And I'd like to start by welcoming Andy Cunningham, who is our independent chair for the Local Pension Board. Hi, Andy. Good to see you. And I'd like now to ask members to introduce themselves. First of all, members and then officers. So, starting with myself, my name's Brenda Massey, and I'm Councillor for Southmead in Bristol. I'm not sure which way is quickest. Should we go around that way?
Councillor Brian Hopkinson for Charlton Hayes and Krebs, South Gloucestershire.
Councillor Ernie Brown, Stoke Gifford, South Gloucester.
Councillor Shelley Bromley, Western in Bath and North East Somerset Council.
Councillor Paul Goggin, Hartcliffe and Withywood, Bristol.
Councillor Andrew Brown, Hengrove and Whitchurch Park, Bristol.
Councillor John Ash, South Gloucestershire Council, representing Bradley Stoke South.
Councillor Don Davis, North Somerset Council, Peel Ward.
Councillor Yasin Mahmood, Lawrence Hill, Bristol City Council.
Councillor David Wilcox in Lockleys Ward in Bristol.
Councillor Ben Nutland, Gate North Ward, South Gloucestershire.
Councillor Neil Butters, Bath Avon South Ward, Bath North East Somerset.
Robert Payne, Councillor for Western Supermare Central, North Somerset Council.
Adam Monk, Councillor for Filton, South Gloucester Council.
Councillor Emma Ali, Vroomveld, Bristol.
Councillor Chris Windows,
representing Henbury and Brentry.
Thank you. And can I now ask the officers to introduce themselves? I'll start with the Chief Fire Officer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Mick Crennell, I'm the Chief Fire Officer and Chief Executive Officer of Avon Fire and Rescue Service.
Where are we going round?
Andy Cunningham, Independent Chair of the Local Pension Board.
Good afternoon, members. Simon Shilton, one Assistant Chief Fire Officers.
Karina Haskins from Bristol City Council. I'm here to take the minutes.
Good afternoon, Angie Feeney, Director of Corporate Services at Avon Fire and Rescue Service.
Good afternoon, Danny O'Neill, Treasurer, Avon Fire Authority.
Hello again, Amanda Brown, Clerk, Avon Fire Authority.
Thank you. Have we covered everybody? I think so. Yep. Okay. In that case, I'm going to hand over to the clerk to provide an update on recruitment of the substantive CFO, CEO.
Yes,
Chair.
thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I may, Chair, I think it might be prudent to ask ACFO Simon Shilton to leave the room at this stage. I don't think there's any real need to, but I think for prudence it might be worth.
If you'd like to go and stand outside, Simon. Go and lurk in a corner somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very short update from me on the recruitment of a substantive Chief Fire Officer and Chief Executive Officer. As you may be aware, members, the closing date for applications was extended until the 28th of November, and that has resulted in the assessment process being delayed, with interviews now taking place on the 7th of January 2022. Members of People and Culture Committee will make a recommendation for appointment in readiness for your March Fire Authority meeting, and the new Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive Officer should be in post from the 1st of April next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And this morning you should have
Sorry, we'll just ask Simon to join us.
Right, thank you, Simon. Okay, then, so just to advise you that the Round 2 HMI CFRS inspection report was published earlier today, and I know it's been emailed out to you all, but I don't expect you've had much of an opportunity to read it yet, because it's quite detailed. So I'm going to hand over to the Chief Fire Officer to read a statement.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. I just wanted to make a brief statement in terms of the inspection and the inspection report. Clearly that was released under embargo yesterday, and then obviously it was published fully this morning at midnight. And members will have an email with that with regards to an email from myself with a full copy of the report. Clearly it's only been a few hours, so clearly you won't have had time to digest that, and you may have just seen the headlines at this stage. And I think it might be worthwhile at this stage for me just to go through a few areas in terms of highlights in order to move things forward. And what we will do is we'll bring a full report back in the March meeting, which will provide you full information with regards to the report, and also, of course, our action plan in terms of the areas for improvement that will be included within there, as there always is with every audit. So, as you'll be aware, my email earlier this morning, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabularies and Fire and Rescue Services, the HMI I'll refer to now, published our latest inspection report on its website just after midnight this morning. Delighted to say that overall, the report paints a very encouraging picture with good progress being made since our last report in December 2018, and which builds on the positive letter following our COVID-19 thematic review, which you'll remember was published in January of this year. You'll obviously need some time to read and digest this latest report, and the plan is for it to be tabled at your next available ordinary meeting on the 30th of March. But it's clearly important to acknowledge publication today, given that you are meeting, even though the timescales involved meant that a report couldn't be submitted for your formal consideration because of the paper deadlines. That said, I'd just like to mention a few specific highlights. Firstly, I think we're naturally very pleased with the previous the previous causes for concern and the inadequate ratings that we received during the round 1 inspections last time have all been resolved. And I think that's a testimony to the determination and commitment of the whole workforce. And on your behalf, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to them for their hard work in that regard. Secondly, our HMI, Wendy Williams, has said within her publication letter today that she's very pleased with the progress the service has made. But of course, there is still more to do, and we are fully aware of that, fully cognizant of the things that we need to do in terms of our continuous improvement journey. She also said that she's delighted that she can now discharge the 3 causes of concern found during the 2018 inspection, which is really encouraging news. Wendy also confirmed that there are no new causes for concern resulting from this latest inspection, and in particular the Inspectorate's assessment of our promotion of the right values and culture has indeed leapt 2 grades from inadequate to good, which I think is fantastic news. And that actually is unusual to be able to jump 2 grades in that regards. And I think it's testament to the effort which has gone into this area of work with us, the way that we look after our staff and the way we engage with our staff over the last couple of years. Finally, I think it's appropriate to note that our public sector decarbonation grant has been highlighted as an area of innovative practice, which again I think is great news. From my perspective, I'd like to congratulate and thank the environmental team for such a notable success in that regards. The report clearly also contains many encouraging examples of good progress, as well as obviously some areas for improvement. And of course, it's incumbent upon us to accept those, to fully look at those, and for us to then report back to you about what we're going to do about that, and of course report to the Inspectorate about what we're going to do about those areas. We're fully aware of them, self-aware organisation, fully cognizant of the continuation of our journey. Some of these things that have been outstanding for a while, they're things that take a long time. And what we have got, very pleasingly, some of them around modernisation and our transformation agenda, digitisation agenda, quite a lot of the areas for improvement are connected to those. And pleasingly, we've got things in place to address each of those things in terms of resources, teams and budgets. I should also mention that the Chief HMI, Sir Tom Windsor, has today also published his annual State of Fire report. It was only sent out a few minutes ago in actual fact, so we'll have time to bring that back to you as well. So we'll bring it back at the same time as the other report so that you're able to see that. That was laid before Parliament, had to be laid before Parliament before it could be published, and that's why we weren't able to share it with you earlier than today. So just to conclude, I think you will receive a formal report in terms of the March Fire Authority, and it will also go through the normal process within performance review and scrutiny so that you can scrutinise our work and hold us to account in terms of the ongoing future improvements. So on the whole, a positive story. I will say from a personal perspective, and I will add a personal view here, when members read the report, I think that you'll read the report and the narrative is very positive, but the graded judgments from my perspective do feel a little bit harsh personally, but that's just a personal view. But what's right and proper is that we have a really good look at it, and what's more, that we have got things in place to address the areas for improvement. As every audit, you're always going to have areas for improvement, and as an organisation which is self-aware and forward-looking, ambitious, and what's more, looking for continuous improvement, it's the right thing to do for us to continue on our journey. So that was it, Chair. I just wanted to share that with you prior to us bringing back a formal report in March. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think it's good to see that we are on an upward trajectory. As you said, it is quite interesting reading the report. It's a bit like reading Ofsted reports, if anybody's a school governor here has been through that process, which is quite painful, as I know from experience. But it's overall, it's definitely moving in the right direction. So, yeah. And there is, at times, as you said, a bit of a mismatch between the context and what's actually graded. But we're going the right way, so that's good. Okay. I Right, I've got to find out where we are now. Oh, yes. I think it's back to you again, Mick. Results of the nomination for Excellence in Fire and Emergency Wards 2021.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's actually right and proper that Angie does this piece of work, actually, Chair, because this is celebrating actually the teams that Angie is responsible for. So, and I know that Angie went to the event, so I think it'd be useful for Angie to provide you with this update.
Thank you, delighted to. Yes, I had the pleasure a couple of weeks ago to go to London with some operational and corporate colleagues, because for the first time Avon was not only nominated but shortlisted for 2 national awards. Those awards that we were nominated for was Emergency Service of the Year and also Team of the Year, and my corporate communications team were nominated for that award. So yes, a very great first-time honour to be both nominated and shortlisted. Unfortunately, on this occasion, we were just pipped to the post on both of those ones, but certainly look forward to being both nominated and shortlisted next year.
Brilliant. Can you pass on our thanks to the team?
I will do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And we look forward to next year. Expect good things.
Me too.
Right. Okay. And the next item, I think you're going to start with, Mick, about the visit on the 1st of December to Temple Fire Station by the Duke of Kent. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we'll get that right. It's pleasing to say, members, that the Chair and myself hosted and welcomed His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent to Temple Fire Station, along with the Lord Lieutenant of Bristol, Peaches Golding, on the 1st of December. Fairly short notice visit. We were only given a couple of weeks' notice, but the purpose of the visit was to come and say thank you, for the Duke to come and say thank you, along with the Lord Lieutenant, for the work that the service has undertaken during COVID. But we also took an opportunity, as you would do, of showcasing our wares and showcasing the excellent work that our teams do. So we organised a drill using the drill tower and the drill yard for the Duke. Bless him, it was a very, very cold day. So we wanted to try and limit the amount of time that was on the drill yard. But we did a rescue from height, simulating the building site next door. So there's a huge building site next door to Temple Fire Station, as we're well aware. So we used that scenario, if you like, to conduct a rescue from height. The teams used rope rescue in order to demonstrate that, but also we demonstrated our new drone capability, capacity, and we linked that to live video footage into the command unit within the drill yard as well, which was great. And we also showcased 2 of our canines and search dogs, and searching for a live casualty, which they found within about 2.5 nanoseconds. It was really good to showcase the work that we do, and I know that the Duke and the Lord Lieutenant were very pleased with that, and were delighted to come along. What we also did is we invited a number of our staff who have gone above and beyond, and we called it Stepping Up and Stepping Forward, and we had a commemorative coin struck for those members of staff who have been driving ambulances, who have been vaccinating people, who have been volunteering at mass vaccination centres for the last 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. And we wanted to say thank you. We had 2 officers from the ambulance service there, 2 senior officers and a paramedic. During the drill, a firefighter and a paramedic worked alongside each other, which is what's been happening for this last couple of years. So that was great, and it was great that the Duke actually took time to come and visit us, but also to present those members of staff with their commemorative coins. So my thanks, Chair, for your support, but also I'd like to thank our teams for organising that event in very short notice. But it was a great event, so thank you.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. And as you said, I think the dogs stole the show, basically.
They always do.
I know. It was one slightly amusing anecdote from it was the fact that we were on the ground floor and we needed to go up to the 3rd floor in the station to offer the Duke some refreshment. And there's a very, very tiny lift there, which you can just about squeeze 2 people into. but there's tape all around the edges, because if you go too far forward, you'll stop the lift, because it's one without a door on it. So I had to go up in the lift to take him up to the 3rd floor. And being a gentleman, he kept standing back and waving me to go in front, whereas actually I had to be close to the door to stop him from walking on the tape. So we did make it, and we didn't get stopped on the way. But it was a bit worrying. I could just imagine the headlines, you know. Duke stuck in lift. Yes, exactly. That was the worst of it. So yeah, it was.
If you're going to get stuck in a lift, that's the best place to do it, sure.
I thought we probably had enough people around who could come and cut us out, but yeah, so it was lovely to see the recognition for everybody. It was really good. And I think I'm handing back to you again, Mick, because you've just come back from Gambia.
Yes, I have. Yeah, sorry, I'm hogging the floor a little bit in the early part of this meeting. But yes, the team have just returned from a trip to Gambia. Members will be aware earlier part of this year, as part of your charity GAFSIP, you very kindly donated a number of fire engines to the Gambia Fire and Rescue Service. And actually, also Royal Berkshire donated a water carrier, water bowser, for the Gambian Fire Rescue Service as well. So over the last few months, we've been shipping those 7 vehicles plus the water bowser over to Gambia. And the team and I, so myself and 3 firefighters, so Paul, Tim and Steve, along with my wife Lindsay, all self-funded, of course, visited Gambia from the 3rd to the 10th was Lindsay and myself, but also from the 3rd to they were there 10 days, the rest of the team, doing some training. Fantastic visit. It's always really sobering and always really fantastic, the work that we do there. And whilst we were there, I met with the Minister of the Interior, who is the Honourable Minister of the Interior, who is essentially their Home Secretary, and presented the keys to the vehicles to him, and also met with a Permanent Secretary. So there was some ceremonial things to do. But the crux of it was actually training. So we were training a number of their officers around water strategy. You can imagine in Gambia, very few hydrants, very low pressure for the ones that you do find. So water is a real issue for them, but also distance is a real issue for them as well. So with the additional fire engines, they were immediately deployed to fire stations. 2 of them went to Bajakunda, which is a new fire station which was opened whilst we were there. And also the water carrier, we did a lot of training on the water carrier, because that will completely change their strategy for dealing with fires. So rather than relying on hydrants miles away, the water carrier is able to dump 2 dams with 4,000 litres of water in each dam, which really does provide them with a solid and sustainable water supply, which is something that they've not been used to. So 3-4 days on the drill yard. Quite a surprise for myself. A long time since I've been on the drill yard, but I absolutely loved it. Training these officers in terms of water strategies and water handling, water management, which I think is really going to springboard them into a different place now, which is great. There's also a shipping container on its way. Unfortunately, it hadn't arrived before we got there, and that shipping container contains a number of things, including sewing machines, so they make their own uniforms. And also there are some compressors on board there as well, which have been funded via the charity, which will be used for recharging breathing apparatus cylinders, which is a capability which you don't currently have except for one place, which is the airport. And clearly, if one place to recharge in cylinders is the airport, it's not going to get done. So we've now got, we will have a compressor on each fire station, which I think will fundamentally shift and change the way that they deal with fires in a safe way, because firefighters were committing themselves into buildings without breathing apparatus, and that's not acceptable. So all in all, very positive trip. My wife Lindsay, with her experience, also did a session for their senior leaders who are women, so 12 women who work for Gambian Fire and Rescue Service at senior level. They had a Ladies and Women in Leadership Day, which was fantastic, and that was a session that we've taken a lot away from, which we will use to inform our next visit, because I think there's other things that we can do. So I won't bore you with too much more, members, but I just wanted to update you. And what we will do is, once we've got all the photographs and that sorted, we will provide you with a more comprehensive update once you're able to have a good look at that. Okay? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, right, then the last bit under Chair's business is me to advise that any voting required will take place as follows: to ask members for any votes against, any abstentions, and a show of hands for all members voting for, so that we can count and record the votes. Right, now I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Fire Authority held on the 15th of October 2021. And I move those minutes. Can I see anybody seconding? Thank you. It's Councillor Monk. Yeah. Thank you. And the next item are the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Audit, Governance and Ethics Committee held on the 23rd of September 2021. I think Councillor Goggins is going to move those.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll move those, please.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Right, thank you. They're moved. And now we move on to a few items for decision. The first one is the financial amendments to the Constitution, which I believe the clerk is going to talk to.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is report number 8 in your bundle, and it's from page 24 onwards for those of you following either on paper or on screen. The report outlines a number of amendments to financial documents in the Fire Authority's constitution, and they were considered by a small group, cross-party group at the Constitution Working Group, and that met on the 5th of November 2021 and went through all these amendments for you to check that you as members would be willing to consider them. A recommendation has therefore been made by the Constitution Working Group that you accept these track changes to the documents, and the documents affected are the financial regulations, which are at Appendix 1, that's the list of all the amendments, the scheme of delegation at Appendix 2, the definition summary at Appendix 3, and then at Appendix 4 you've got track changes to the actual Constitution document. I should explain that in that respect the early amendments are all added text, whereas towards the end of the document you will see there's a lot of deleted text, and that's to reflect the fact that that section's been moved into an earlier part of the Constitution. So it's not a mistake, it's just as we do track changes, some things are accepted and some things are rejected. The amendments include the removal that we used to have at the end of the Constitution, a specified amount summary, which was slightly illogical, being at the end of the Constitution, that has now been moved more logically within the scheme of delegation section. And there's a separate members' allowance scheme now, which will just be at the end of the Constitution. So that's going to be kept entirely separate and is the subject of a separate paper, which we are going to discuss this afternoon. So in terms of recommendations, you are being asked to approve the amendments to the Fire Authority Constitution, namely the amendments to the financial regulations at Appendix 1, the scheme of delegation at Appendix 2, the definition summary at Appendix 3, and all those amendments can be seen as track changes at Appendix 4. There are no financial implications as such, save that the amendments would strengthen the financial control practices within the Fire Authority. They align to best practice, and they are really to reflect the fact that the finance team structure has changed under the Finance Improvement Plan, and also we have introduced devolved budgets, so those changes reflect those changes. I can also confirm that the Treasurer has worked with our internal audit providers, and they have reviewed all these suggested changes and confirmed that they've captured the key issues and reflect best practice. So I don't intend to go through all the appendices with you. You've had the papers. The tables at the first appendices list all the changes, and at Appendix 4 they're actually set out for you. But I'm happy to take any questions, or if they're financial nature, I have Ben here, who's the financial accountant within the headquarters, and our treasurer available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No?
Shocked silence.
Right. Okay. So in that case, if there's no questions, we need to make a decision on this. So can I see anybody who wants to vote against?
Sorry, proposer and seconder.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. A proposer? Right. And a seconder? Thank you.
I didn't write down name because so many hands shot up at the same time. So if we put Councillor Ash as proposed, and sorry, who was the seconder?
I think Councillor Davis was the nearest to him,
Councillor
but we had quite a
Davis.
few people.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Chair, could I just before Ben leaves us, could I just give my personal thanks to Ben, our financial accountant. This was a huge piece of work. It never looks that significant, but it took many, many days, and it's a very welcome contribution that Ben and the finance team have made. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you for all the work. I can imagine it was quite soul-destroying at times, looking at the pages there. But anyway, can we move to the vote? And anybody against? No? Any abstentions? No? In that case, the vote is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
And I just confirm that we will make the amendments on the version online immediately, but obviously the paper version won't be issued until the next financial year because we might have other amendments we want to vote on to the Constitution in the meantime. The Constitution Working Group will meet as and when required.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, then moving on to item 9 on the agenda is the Fire Authority meeting dates 2022-23 and the forward plan 2020 to 21. I believe you're presenting that as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm now going to present to you, members, paper number 9, which is at page 196 of your bundle. The purpose of this report is to present for your approval the proposed schedule of meeting dates for the next municipal year, 2022-23, and the table of those dates is set out under paragraph 5.1 of the report, and also to present to you a revised forward plan. At every fire authority meeting we have a forward plan which sets out the key decisions which are going to be made at the next meetings of each, the fire authority and the committees. So I'm recommending to you that you approve these proposed schedule of meeting dates within the report and also note the revised forward plan. There is one comment I need to make. In fact, there are two amendments I just need to bring to your attention. At the table at paragraph 5.1 on page 197 of your bundle, you will see that under the first column for AFA AGM, you've got two dates there currently, the 8th or the 22nd of June 22. The reason for that, as indicated by their asterisks, is we were waiting for confirmation from Bristol City Council as to when they were holding their AGM. Under your standing orders relating to meetings, our AGM must be held within a month of all the AGMs of all the constituent unitary authorities. So I was waiting for that date to arrive, and it hadn't arrived by the date I published this paper. I can now inform you that Bristol City Council's AGM is on the 24th of May. So as it suits us better to have fire authority meetings at the end of the month, we are going to go for the 22nd of June. Okay, so you can cross out the 8th, and it will be the 22nd of June 22. So that's one change. In relation to the forward plan at Appendix 1 to my paper, there is one small amendment under the Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee, which is on page 201. I'm going to be crossing out, because it's now been moved, the devolved budgets update by the Treasurer. That item will not be presented to that meeting as it's not now required. So those are the only two amendments. So subject to those two amendments, and unless you need any further information from me, I would ask that members vote on whether they wish to approve these meeting dates and note the revised plan. Thank you.
I was going to ask our Treasurer whether she wants to check the date for the February 23 meeting.
Any?
I was being the 28th of February, Danielle, and from our conversation around meetings, did you want to make a comment on that?
Thank you. So the February 22 date.
February 23.
Oh, okay.
We've already set our dates.
Okay. I think that's very helpful to have it at the end of the month. Just to assure members, that is within the statutory framework for the Fire Authority, that we have to approve and communicate the agreed precept to unitary authorities by the 1st of March in each financial year. Thank you.
So that date is within the range? Yes. Okay, any other comments? No? Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, the dates of the meetings, I was just wondering if they should have what time the meetings are as well, or will that be determined at a later date?
Councillor, thank you for that question. We always hold the Fire Authority meetings at 1400 hours on a Wednesday, generally. That's what we aim to do. The other committee meetings tend to take place at 10:30. The reason we don't specify that in this paper is because, particularly with the COVID restrictions, it's room capacity and room availability which is becoming the issue. So we don't want to tie our hands too much and have a little bit of flexibility, but we want to get a placeholder in your diary, if that's okay. So what Emma will do is she will send out invitations for all these dates, and if she needs to amend the time, she can then amend those invitations, if that's okay.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yes, it is okay, but I just think members ought to have an input into that decision.
Are you proposing different meeting times, Councillor? No, okay.
I'm not. I'm just thinking that we probably ought to have some input into it.
Happy to discuss meeting times if people want to do that briefly now, or I don't know whether those are the times that I hate saying we've always done it that way, because I'm someone who's in favour of change. So if meeting times don't currently work for members, I'd welcome hearing that so that we can fix meetings at times which are more convenient.
I think we did have an issue in the past with some meetings, particularly whole Fire Authority meetings, that started late afternoon, which meant that in the winter it was very dark, and when at that stage we were travelling around the whole area, it was felt that it, particularly for women members of the authority, we didn't feel particularly safe walking back to cars in the dark, so we did agree that we would make particularly winter meetings either in the morning or the afternoon, just on a pure personal safety grounds. But I'm happy to discuss it further if you feel we should change things. Yeah, sorry.
Just a small comment to that. Also, there was an issue about some meetings being held rather late on a Friday, which meant we got caught up in traffic. So.
Yeah. I think we would try to avoid that if at all possible.
I think at the moment Fridays are used less often, but when they are, it's a morning meeting for that very reason. Yeah,
that's right.
Okay, well, I think we need a proposer and a seconder, please.
So I'm happy to propose it. Can we have somebody to second it? Neil, are you seconding it? Thank you. Anybody against? Any abstentions? No. In that case, that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's quite difficult because of the size of the room and looking round. I can't necessarily see everybody, so if I miss you, can you please wave and shout at me? Because with the COVID restrictions, it's not helping very much. Okay, right, item 10. This is the independent review of member allowances scheme, and I'm handing over to the clerk again for this one.
Yes, apologies. You will get sick of hearing from me, I'm afraid. I'm now going to present to you paper 10, which is at page 202 of your bundle. This concerns the independent review of members' allowances scheme. By way of summary, every fire authority must have a member allowances scheme, which is issued for each financial year. Your scheme was last substantively reviewed in 2018, and since then has just been the subject of annual adjustments in line with the Green Book Pay Awards. Unfortunately, the authority is not allowed to rely on that automatic mechanism for more than 4 years. So every 4 years, you must seek an independent review of your allowances scheme. So at your meeting on the 30th of June 2021, you approved the members' allowance scheme for this year. So the scheme is already in place up until the end of March. But you directed me as your clerk to appoint someone to undertake an independent review of your member allowances scheme in readiness for the financial year 2022-23. So this report presents to you that independent review and includes a number of recommendations which we will work through. So the recommendations are that you consider the report, which is presented to you, dated November 2021, by Brian E. Holden, who is the Chief Executive of South West Councils, which is at Appendix 1 to your papers. And the second recommendation is that you consider the 11 recommendations outlined within her report and decide on what member allowances should be adopted for the financial years 2022-23 and 23-24. Now, there's a reason why the recommendation covers 2 subsequent financial years, and that is because the report has identified that your allowances have got out of step with allowances across local authorities, and because they are somewhat behind where they should be, it was felt more appropriate to increase them in stages rather than in one big increase in one financial year. So that's why the recommendation covers 2 financial years. So in terms of the background, I've covered that slightly already on page 203. It's worth saying that as a fire authority, we do not have to have an independent remuneration panel. We just simply have to have regard to the recommendations of council remuneration panels. And you will see when you read the report of Brian E. Holden that she's not only looked at the member allowances for your unitary councils, but she's also done quite a significant benchmarking work. So she's compared your allowances to those paid across the combined fire authority sector, also the southwest fire authorities, just so that you can get a sort of benchmark from those, and also from fire authorities which cover a similar size of population. So you can see where we are in relation to those fire authorities as well. If I move on, there are financial implications to this report, which are set out in a table on page 204. And you will see that the financial implications are different depending on which financial year you're looking at. And the total at the bottom is for each column. It's not a total for the bottom line. It's a total for each column running down the page. By way of key considerations, I instructed Brian E. Holden on the advice of other fire and rescue authorities. She is an expert in her field. She has conducted many of these reviews, and she is also chair of independent remuneration panels and members and a member of other remuneration panels. So she has quite extensive experience on this topic. She did reach out to you all for support in this independent review, and I know some of you really did help her, so thank you very much. Out of the 20 members, 16 responded to her, to a questionnaire, and she interviewed 5 members and interviewed a good cross-selection, including the chair, vice chair, a committee chair, and so on. So she found that really helpful, so thank you, members, again, for your input to that process. She identified from that feedback that on average each elected member will spend around 4.5 hours a week on fire authority business, and she's used that as the measure by which to determine how the allowances should work in future. If I can refer you please to paragraph 5.2 of my report. I set out there the benchmarking data that she's considered because I think it's really helpful. That she's not making this recommendation in isolation. She's looked at allowances across a very wide selection of particularly fire authorities in the country. Also at 5.3, what I've tried to do is to summarise her key points so we don't have to go through her report page by page. So what she said is our allowances have, her quotes, got out of kilter over time. And I don't know to what extent your allowances were thoroughly reviewed in 2018, so it may have been they were out of step then. I really don't know. But the point is, now we're 4 years hence, they are very much out of step. So I've listed in bullet points the key findings. So she said that the basic allowance paid to members is well below the average for similar-sized authorities and the South West average, and she recommends that that is increased incrementally. She has found that the chair's allowance is below all the averages and is lower than the South West fire authorities and also the fire authorities with similar size population, and it is recommended that that is also increased incrementally. For committee chairs, and I'm sure committee chairs will be pleased to hear this, the allowance is substantially out of line with other fire authorities, and I think we had a bit of a strange thing in our policy where committee chairs were getting the lowest of all the allowances, whereas actually their duties were quite high. And the group leader's role, there was a relook at that because it was looked at in terms of the time spent fulfilling that role, and that's the only one that she suggested be reduced in terms of the allowance paid. She has also recommended that there be a role description for group leaders, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And she further recommended that we keep the Green Book as a mechanism, as the index by way of yearly increases to the allowances until the 4-yearly review, which makes perfect sense. She also makes very clear that although the figures in her report are good as at today's date, we still haven't had the Green Book Pay Award for this year. So what she's saying is, please regard my figures as the baseline, and then you have to add on to that the Green Book Pay Award once it's been announced, because all the benchmark data that she's been looking at will also increase roughly by that percentage, so that's why she said that. Okay. And I think it's important to draw particularly to the members of public attention at paragraph 5.4. I think this is the most important paragraph in the report, so if I could draw your attention to it at page 205. The input that she received from allowances was that there was no push for your allowances to be uprated. So this report and the recommendations are not in response to your requests. You were very fair about you were happy with your allowances. So I want to make the point for the public that it's not that you've all lobbied this lady to make her prepare a report in a certain way. And what she said is that basically our allowances got out of step, and they need to recognise the hard work of elected members. And also, they need to be such that they attract committed and talented members. What we don't want for the future is people not volunteering to be a fire authority member because they don't think they can afford to do so because of the work versus the allowances they get. So I think that's really important to note, that it's not a case of we're just going to uplift them because members wanted them uplifted. So I think that is the key aspects of my report. I would also draw your attention to, on page 2 of Appendix 1, pages 2 and 3, That's the executive summary of the report, and it sets out rather helpfully all the recommendations. You will see 9 of them are recommendations, which all relate to the allowance amount and how they're calculated. Recommendations 10 and 11 are called advisory recommendations. I can tell you that for advisory recommendation 10, I have been struggling to find a role description for a political group leader. I have been reaching out to try and find one. So if anyone knows of one that we could look at adopting, please let me know. So I will continue my work, but that's a bit of a challenge for me. The second advisory recommendation 11 is that we assist you by wherever possible being flexible and having meetings virtually and online. And as a fire authority, I'm pleased to say that whenever it's not a meeting that the law requires us to meet in person, we do that. So for member development sessions or anything else, we hold those meetings online so that you don't have to unnecessarily travel to venues. So we're already doing advisory recommendation 11. So I know, I think members have had an opportunity to consider this out of this meeting, so I'm hoping this will be a short debate. But anyway, I hand over this paper to the floor and I'm happy to answer any questions. Unfortunately, Bryony couldn't be here today. She wanted to be, but she's involved in a recruitment process, I think, for another Chief Fire Officer. So she's a bit tied up today, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you for that helpful explanation of where we are. Any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Can we look at the table on section 4.1? I'm looking at the line for committee chair, mainly because I am a committee chair. Is the increase in 22-23 really £1,098? Because that's doubling it. Should it not be 15?
Gosh, you're going to ask me a maths question now, aren't you?
I'll have to get my calculator
I've taken the table. Bryony provided me with that table, so I will just check her report, what she said about the committee chairs. If you hold on. So she has recommended, so I'm just finding, so the current chairs of committee get £1,083, and she is recommending, so I'm just finding the figure. Gosh, it's in the, sorry, it's in the next column, it's in the summary as well. Yeah, she is. So it's 2,000. She's recommending. Recommendation number 5, Councillor, is the relevant one on page 2.
Right.
So she's recommending an allowance of 2,181 for 22-23 and 2,778 in 23-24.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. Okay.
Probably. Thank you.
Right. Any other comments?
Councillor Butters?
Right, sorry, yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's a good report. If we're going to be commissioning an independent report, I think we've got to have very good grounds for gainsaying it, despite the fact that we reduced my pay, but that's the way it goes. I think there is something of a role for party group leaders around coordination and encouraging members to attend, etc. So I wish the clerk luck in formulating a correct phrase there. But yeah, I think by and large we should give it our support and be grateful for her work. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have a conversation with Bryony, and she was very helpful. It makes a lot of sense, the outcome from this. I did think it was quite funny that the chair's the poorest paid anywhere. But right. Is it Don? Don, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we should record our thanks to Bryony. I mean, people who know Bryony through South West Councils will know the depth of knowledge she has about local government nationally, and obviously particularly in the southwest. So I would say, I suppose I can speak from as a person with the 8-year rule will be leaving at the end of next year, so that the actual financial benefit to me is going to be really relatively small. But I do think the numbers do need to reflect the fact we are now 5 less than we used to be. So actually we've been making a year-on-year saving in allowances for the last 3 years, I think. You've gone from 25 down to 20 members. I mean, by necessity, the 20 members have clearly done a lot more work. And I know the HMICFRS report is very much within our minds today, but part of that was around the governance, and I think that all members will hopefully agree with me, the fact that we are doing far more than used to be the case. I mean, those that participate in the Constitutional Review paper will know how much time that took. And if we are to be a better run service, it does mean members need to invest time, and members have other demands on their time. And if they feel they're not being properly rewarded in some way, shape or form, I think that reflects on the people that then join there, and that affects the ongoing governance of the authority. So I think we should, if we were asked for a report that's come back as well balanced and well argued, I think we should do that, and I certainly just speak as somebody who won't benefit very much financially from it when I leave at the end of next year. But thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any other comments? Oh, sorry, it's quite difficult in this room because it's so spread out to actually see you. Sorry, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'm suggesting possibly that the clerk works with the existing group leaders to come up with this definition. They'll probably have more knowledge about the wrangling of councillors being very much like herding cats. Perhaps that can be done, and also again looking at with the increase in basic allowances, perhaps some kind of recommendation or so forth around a mandatory amount of attendance unless exceptional circumstances, so that the allowances reflect the serious commitment that the vast majority of members make, but then looks at anyone who isn't, meeting those standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Councillor, thank you very much for making that point. Can I also refer members to page 15 of Bryony's report? There's a title there called Other Issues. And it is something I've discussed with her, that whether allowances should be linked to attendance, for example. And she specifically says at paragraph 10.2, on the issue of participating, there is no ability to recognise additional participation, except, of course, through the special responsibility allowances or levels of attendance. There is also no requirement to manage performance. But the advisor would suggest it's good practice to have at least some light touch process in place, and that was suggested through the group leaders. So that's very much where I am, that if I spot anything, I will be speaking to group leaders, and that's why I need to have that dialogue with them about their terms of reference. So, but I don't recommend that you pass a resolution about that today, because it's not recommended in the report. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments from anybody? Yep.
So, to the clerk, in terms of attendance, is that something that the Constitutional Working Group could look at next time it meets? Because I do feel and so I'm not singling any member out, but if a member is being financially rewarded to be participating in this, if there is not a mechanism for that person to be removed, and I'm not looking to get people removed quickly, and there are always circumstances, but there should be a requirement for them to meet a minimum criteria as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't think it would be the Constitution Working Group, because that's just for amendments to the Constitution. I think it's something that we can discuss further offline, because she does mention light touch. I think it's something that needs to be considered with the group leaders, so that we get a cross-party agreement about what we expect as a minimum. We do have standards of conduct, for example, for elected members. So I think if you're happy, I realise it is an issue for members. They do want to feel that if we're going to support this paper, that we need the commitment both ways. So I will take that away from this meeting. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah. Sorry, Neil. Yeah.
One thing just to close off, there's no allowance for deputies, of course, and presumably that is off the table anyways. I just wanted to clarify that point, that if somebody can't come, is there any possibility, if it's an important issue, that a deputy could be sent? Or I mean, I presume not, but just to clarify.
Councillor, as far as I'm aware, there's never been a provision in our members' allowances scheme, and I did ask Bryony if there was anything in the scheme that she thought we'd missed or should be added in. So I didn't just ask her to incrementally update. I asked her to review the whole scheme to see if there was anything that we hadn't done, which was good practice, and she told me that the scheme was absolutely fine, so she didn't cover that deputy point. Did you cover that with her at all in your questionnaire or anything?
Not sure I did. We certainly had a conversation about members' attendance.
Yeah, okay.
But as I say, I'm not pressing for it.
No.
I just thought that it was worth just exposing that issue in case somebody can't attend and it's something important. Because there was a case a couple of years ago at Nailsea where the only people left at the end of the day were myself and the current PCC. And we ended up dealing with half of the business unofficially.
I think in my tenure, certainly, so for the last year, the person who's mainly deputised has been the chair. So when we've been short of people, for example, chairing people and culture, your fire authority chair has stepped up. So I don't think we've impacted anyone else too much around the table. So, but thank you for your comment.
It's a good point, actually, to make sure that if people are allocated to or are sitting on a committee, that they should make every attempt possible to be there, and if not, to contact whoever's chairing that committee as soon as possibly can to see if we can get somebody else in there. So I think it's sort of part of the way we should be working anyway. But yeah, so any more comments?
Sorry, may I just check that then? Does the chair can substitute, but can somebody else substitute as well if it came to it? They can. Can anybody substitute?
Yes, so members can elect effectively a standing chair for the meeting. So they decide between themselves who's going to chair the meeting. So that's perfectly permissible. Yes. Normally we have to ensure that it's, obviously the meeting has to be quorum with the members which are assigned, but what I can do, I think, as clerk is go to the political leader, because we have to have political balance on the committees, and I could go to the political, if I get sufficient notice, I can go to the political leader and say, look, your assigned member for this committee is unable to attend, would you like to send a substitute? I think that would be perfectly acceptable. It's just making sure that we don't get the balance wrong on the committees, that's the point.
And that is in the Constitution, and actually is not more descriptive.
I think this has actually thrown up quite a few things which it would be useful to explore in more depth, and if we have a small working party looking at it after Christmas, that could be quite useful. So, any more comments? No. Okay. In that case, we need to move to the vote.
Do you want to propose, Chair?
I will propose, yes. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Okay, so anybody against? Any votes against, please indicate. No. Any abstentions? One abstention. Any other abstentions? No. Okay, in that case, that is carried. So,
Thank you. And can I just take that you've carried all 11 recommendations, and I'll ask that the minutes list all 11 recommendations on Appendix 1 of the report. Thank you.
okay, thank you for that. Good. Okay, down to item 11 now, which is the Treasurer to provide the 2021-22 Revenue Financial Report.
Thank you, Chair. This report can be found on page 222 of your board pack. And this provides a financial update on the Fire Authority's revenue budgets based on the October results. The recommendations in this report are to note the latest income and expenditure forecast and to approve the budget adjustments contained within Appendix 3. The October revenue results project a small forecast overspend of £60,000, and this equates to less than 0.1% of the approved annual budget. The details are shown within Appendix 1 and 2, and some of the key considerations found within 5.1 to 5.2 are as follows. Employees' costs are showing a small projected underspend, largely relating to a few vacancies within corporate services. The premises budget is forecasting an overspend of 113k, 100k of which management are projecting will relate to energy and utility costs. Management are reviewing that in January, so I will provide the Fire Authority with an update in the next revenue report. There are also some small ongoing underspends on transport due to COVID. Appendix 3 shows the budget adjustments that the Fire Authority are being asked to approve today. And if I could take you to section 5.9, which gives members an update on the Devolved Budget Pilot Scheme. This section confirms that draft budgets have now been shared with the Fire Authority via the Chair, the Chief Fire Officer, Corporate Services and the Transformation Budget. The Finance Department are aiming to share draft operational budgets in December. And providing that work flows through and there are no significant issues raised, the Finance Department aim to roll out devolved budgets from the 1st of April. And again, I'll be happy to give members an update in my next report. Just to note, we've had the Constitution update, which members have approved today. That strengthens financial control. And we also took to AJAC a new budgetary control framework, which again helps financial control and gives an overview to budget holders and budget managers about their responsibilities when we go live 1st of April. So on that note, if members are happy to approve Appendix 3, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to the Treasurer? Sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions about Appendix 2, if that's all right. In Section B, expenditure, transformation seemed to be subject to some underspend, and I'd like some reassurance that the foot will not be taken off the pedal on that, and that spending will be reciprocated in the next financial year. Please.
Yeah, I can answer that, Councillor. Yeah, the actual underspend is essentially around a vacancy in the team. I can assure you that foot won't be taken off the pedal, and we will be doing everything we can to make sure that the team is at full strength and moving forward at pace, because it's really important. The transformation programme is critical for us moving forward in terms of digitisation and, shall we say, modernisation of our service. So yes, as the SRO, I've got an avid interest in this. Thank you.
Good. My second point is a clarification in point 4 of that table, supplies and services. Scrap cars and extrication challenge. What's the extrication challenge, please?
Could I pass over to my learned colleague, Simon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor, the extrication challenge is a national, it's a national competition, if you like, which enables each service to demonstrate their innovation, techniques and professionalism in new methodology, new equipment with regards to operation incidents and dealing with the extrication of casualties from road traffic incidents and complex rescues as well. So that's what's related to that particular element of the finance statement.
So it literally is extricating.
Yes, it's a range of things. It's extricating different scenarios on a national level. We have a team of volunteers that demonstrate their skill set in the area, and they come from all areas of the organisation, operational areas of the organisation, and a number of specialist rescue scenarios, if you like. So there may be road rescue, there may be water rescue, but extrication from road traffic collisions. So any type of human entrapment is replicated in a safe environment for them to test and display their skill sets and their expertise.
Great, thank you.
Things you learn at some of these meetings.
And if I may add, importantly, they bring those skills back into the organisation, and it raises the skills and the level of really high quality extrication skills in the whole service. So.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. If there's no more comments or questions, can we move to the vote on this then? And I'll propose it if somebody would like to second it. Don, thank you. Can anybody against? Can you indicate? No. Anybody abstaining? Right, so that's carried. Thank you. Right, and we're down to item 12, which is service plan proposals, and I think that's over to you, Mick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's myself and Jane as a double act, so I'd like to welcome Jane Williams-Locke to the room today for members. Jane is Angie's deputy and leads very much in terms of the organisational development and also development of the service plan and corporate planning. Paper 12, or item 12 on your agenda, members, is essentially for decision and is for a decision in terms of the proposals that the service have developed on your behalf, for which we would seek your permission and your assurance that we could go out for consultation between now and the publication date of the new service plan. Our service plan is a 3-year rolling programme, and what we do is we refresh it each year. And we make sure that we stay on track. We make sure that we are considering all risks, emergent risks and current risks, and that we are doing exactly what we need to do to keep our community safe, but also as an organisation, we are stronger and better at what we do. So each year, you'll recall that we publish our plan on the 1st of April, but it goes through an iterative process. It goes through a number of touch points, which I'll hand over to Jane in a minute. I don't want to steal too much of Jane's thunder, but I would like to put on record my thanks to Jane and the team for a fantastic piece of work thus far. But we've come to a point with this, members, where we've had a number of touch points through the year with the service leadership team, service leadership board and members to develop our considerations to go out to proposal in terms of the next iteration of our service plan. What the plan does for us is essentially it combines our organisational direction, so therefore is our North Star, but also combines what we statutory have to produce, which is an integrated risk management plan. And the integrated risk management plan requires us to say, answer the 6 questions of risk. The 6 questions of risk are who, what, when, where, how and why is somebody at risk in our communities. And what we have to do as an organisation is we have to answer the questions of those risks. And what we do is we do a strategic analysis, which is an external view of our environment, whereby we consider all of the areas for consideration in terms of either corporate risk and or community risk. We also consider demographics, changes in demography and so on, and how risk might be changing in our environment and our communities. We also do an internal assessment, and our internal assessment is what we call our baseline assessment, which is where we have a good look at our organisational activity, the types of incidents that we go to, how many, what time of day, where our hotspots are, and so on and so on. So those 2 key documents for us populate our IRMP risk register, and essentially that's where we do a formal risk rating, if you like, of all of the different incident types and so on for our communities. Because then what we have to do is I, as your chief officer on your behalf, make a statement in our plan, which is essentially a service management statement, which says we understand our patch very well, these are the resources we're going to put in place under preventing, protecting, responding and resilience in order to manage those risks within our communities. But also 2 further objectives of making our service stronger and also investing in our people. And the last one is around transformation and digitisation of the service. So what this lays out in here is what we are going to do, or what we're going to review in this next year. And it's broken down into those objectives of preventing, protecting, responding, resilience, improving our service, investing in our people, and transformation. And under each of those objectives will be proposals for what we're going to do. And those proposals will be broken down into things we will review and things we will do. And this has taken, as you can see, it's a lot of work to get to where we are. What we need to do now, there is no statutory requirement for us to go out for public consultation with this, because at this stage, because there's nothing in here which will be earth-shattering or will be what I would call big-ticket items which would require public consultation, like changing fire cover on a fire station or closing a fire station or whatever. None of that is in here. But what we would like to do, from a prudence perspective, and to ensure that we are on track and going in the right direction, is to take a sounding from our communities with the questions that are within the consultation strategy, so that we are ensured that we are comfortable that we're going in the right direction. So I don't want to steal any more of Jane's thunder, but I will hand over to Jane, who will perhaps provide members with an overview of the paper, the proposals. I don't go into too much detail, Jane, because there's a lot here, and also obviously the consultation strategy, and dance us through those highlights. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As some members would know, we used to have a corporate plan and a separate integrated risk management plan. As the Chief said, we combined those 2 documents into one service plan in 2019. This is the 2nd iteration of that service plan. And what we did as a team is look at all the objectives from the last service plan. We tracked all of those, made sure that those were regularly reported upon, and then we did as the Chief said, a risk assessment on the community, that's our IRMP, and that is included in this service plan. If I could take you to section 3 of the cover paper. This gives you an overview of the amount of consultation we did with members, with the SLB, with the statutory officers. And we started this process in April, and we touched points with key members, the service board, the service leadership team, to get their considerations, to have that collaborative approach to forming the service plan proposals. You will see from section 5, the Chief talked about the set of proposals under prevention, protection, response and resilience, and also improving our service under and investing in our staff and transformation. I won't go through all of them, but those are the key ones that we are presenting today for members' approval. We also produced a consultation strategy, and if it's approved today, we would like to go out, commence that consultation on the 4th of January, and run it until the 18th of February. So it will have 7 weeks consultation period. And we got various channels that people can feed back to us with. And once that consultation is ended, I'll collate all of that feedback and bring it back to the Fire Authority for your consideration. And then we will bring back the final version of this service plan to you. The service plan itself will be monitored through the Performance Risk and Scrutiny Committee regularly, and also we will bring it back on an annual basis for the whole Fire Authority to have oversight of how we're, the progress we're making towards the objectives in the service plan. So unless members have any questions, I've made it short and sweet, but if anybody's got questions, then please let me know.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Any questions from anybody? Adam?
Thank you. So I understand all of that, I think, which is always a good start. Just earlier we referred to, or Mick referred to, the report that was received, that was embargoed until this morning, and that's now been released, and I can't remember the correct title of that document. But so, does this consultation take into account, which you clearly can't have done really, the actions coming out of that report? Because in terms of the transformation element, that's what I'm thinking of. I don't have a problem with what we're trying to achieve. I'm just wondering how the two sit side by side.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Very good question, and the answer is yes. We had immediate feedback after our inspection, and whilst that was informal, we picked up on all of the elements of that. Quite a lot of the things in the report are already underway in terms of digitisation, investing in our ICT systems and so on, which may take some time. So we're already aware of quite a lot of these things. None of this was a surprise to us, and we've already got things in place and in play. Certain areas we have preempted what was going to be in the report based on that feedback, and we have included them in here. And a good example is actually one of the objectives is around productivity, and one of the recommendations from areas for improvement from the inspectorate published today was the fire authority or the fire service needs to ensure that the productivity of its operational staff is appropriate, or wording to that effect. So rest assured is in here as an objective. So the answer is yes, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? No. Anything you want to say?
No, thank you. If there's no further comments or questions, then members, there is recommendations on page 230, which is in relation to approving the draft service plan for public consultation, but utilising the consultation strategy, which is at 2B of the recommendations. So if members are happy, then that will be the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. No more comments, nothing? Oh, sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Brenda. So this is a strategy for 3 years. At what point do we get actually feedback about how well it's working? Does that happen every year or every 6 months?
We will bring it back to the Fire Authority each year of that 3-year period, just so that you can have oversight of the progress that we're making towards each of those objectives. So we will be monitoring actions and progress against those, probably monthly from managers. We'll be reporting it to the PRSC, Performance Risk and Scrutiny Committee, and but we will bring it back to the Fire Authority each year so that you can be assured that we're moving forward.
So reported to PRSC regularly, and then on an annual basis, when we refresh the plan, there'll be, well, this is what we did. We said we were going to do this. This is what we've done. To answer your question, Councillor.
Yes, it does. Apart from PRSC means People's Republic of Stokes Croft to me.
Sorry, Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee. My apologies. Yeah, Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee. Yeah.
Only those of us from Bristol would know that one, David.
It's we're very fond of TLAs, 3-letter acronyms.
going to give you my favourite one, but I'll leave that one for later.
That one's actually a 4-letter acronym, to be pedantic. Okay, any more comments? No, can't see any. So...
Can we have a proposer, please?
Yeah, I'll propose that, if you like. A seconder? Right, Adam, thank you. So, anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Okay, that's carried then, thank you. Right, getting there. So, item 13 is the immediate detriment, which we have the Director of Corporate Services and the Clerk to present.
I think we also have Jeff Cleek. So I am going, thank you, Chair, I'm going to introduce this paper and I'm going to help Angie deliver sections of the paper so that you don't get too overwhelmed with hearing one voice for too long. But we are supported today by Jeff Cleek from Baines, our pension administrators, who's going to be sat in the room available to answer any questions. And we're also supported by our wonderful new chair, Andy Cunningham of the Local Pension Board, who has a lot more knowledge and expertise in pensions than either Angie or I do. So we're delighted that he is here to support us as well. So members, it's paper 13. I'm sure you've enjoyed reading it. It's at page 325 of your bundle. So I think the reason I decided I'd kick this off is I presented... Welcome, Jeff, by the way. Sorry, I started talking before you arrived. I wanted to present the introduction to you just simply because I went through this in quite some detail at your meeting on the 30th of June, and I thought it was helpful for me to just go through the background with you. So on page 326 of your bundle, you will see the recommendations, which we are going to skip over at this stage, and there's a reason for that. When we circulated the papers over a week ago, we were told, a legal advice from the Local Government Association, advice that had been commissioned by the Local Government Association, was due to land imminently. I've heard that word a lot in relation to immediate detriment. And so when Angie and I were working on this paper, we decided to keep the recommendations deliberately wide. In other words, so you had all the options available to you in those recommendations. Now, that does make them quite hard to digest and hard to follow what we're asking you or recommending that you do today. So we had a relook at those recommendations in the last couple of days because the legal advice hasn't arrived as promised, okay? So we're in a position where we don't have that legal advice. So you will all find on your tables, I'm hoping, because I delivered them earlier, a new piece of paper which has at the top of it 3 recommendations. So if I can just check every member has that piece of paper. Okay. Okay. All right, thank you. Half of these recommendations are exactly the same as they appear in the report, but half of them have been tweaked to make clear recommendations to you because we don't have this legal advice. When we get to this stage at the end, so Angie's going to take you through these at the end of our presenting the paper to you, I will be seeking a proposer and a seconder, which I think I've already, the chair and vice chair have agreed to play that role, to propose these as a new motion for you because they're not strictly the ones that were put in the papers which you received a week ago. So we will have that separate vote before you then go on to decide whether you're happy to adopt these recommendations. So that deals with those. I would then like to direct you to paragraph 3.1, which is background, which is on page 328 of the bundle, and I'll rattle through this quite quickly. And you will recall that back in December 2018, there was a Court of Appeal decision which found that the Firefighters Pension Scheme 2015 contained some discriminatory provisions. And therefore, those firefighters who were forced to transfer onto that scheme were at a disadvantage. Since then, there have been lots of movements by the government, but no new legislation resolving that issue. So at our meeting that we held on the 30th of June this year, you had asked me to commission legal advice, which I obtained from an eminent QC, Adrian Lynch QC, and we considered together in exempt session that very detailed legal advice. I think it ran to about 30 pages, so it was quite a long piece of work. As a result of that discussion, you collectively decided to start processing immediate detriment cases, but you decided to process only some immediate detriment cases, and they were the most straightforward ones, if I can put it that way. We identified in your decision on that date, and I think it's at Appendix 1, a list of cases that you weren't willing to process. And that list was not random. That list was taken from all the complex cases which were identified in Home Office guidance. So when the Home Office issued their guidance documents, they said, but be careful about these cases. And so that was the list that we pulled together for you to say, don't process those yet, just process the straightforward ones. Okay? I can tell you that since you made that decision, paragraph 1.1 of the report tells you that we have now processed 6 firefighters' pensions under their legacy schemes, and there are 4 more in the pipeline. So your decision was absolutely followed. The pension administrators have been working exceptionally hard at Baines, and they have pulled it out of the hat, basically, and worked hard to process those cases. There is now a new bill going through Parliament. If you look at paragraph 3.4, it is called the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Bill. Judicial offices sounds strange. It's because the legislation about the judges' pension schemes was also challenged, so that's why it's called judicial offices. That is not yet an Act of Parliament. It's working its way through Parliament at the moment. And as you will realise with pensions, it doesn't tell the administrators what they need to know. It's very much an umbrella piece of legislation. What the pension administrators need is the pension regulations which will be issued as secondary legislation. And we are told that secondary legislation, but also the new tax rules that need to be developed to cope with all of this, are unlikely to be passed until the autumn of 2023. So you can see already that it is moving, but it's moving this government machine very slowly in this respect. So giving you that bit of background, hopefully that's reminded you where we are. I'm now going to hand over to Angie. So I would refer you to paragraph 3.5 on page 328 of your bundle. She's going to run you from that point onwards, and she's going to outline to you what has happened since the meeting in June, because the landscape has changed quite significantly. So Angie, over to you.
Sure you don't want to carry on with it, Amanda? I'd be very happy. Okay. So as Amanda has kind of described, I'm then going to run through how the landscape has changed since then, and I'll run through it in chronological order, and I will also summarise the appendices, which are kind of quite detailed and complex in nature. So in early October, the LGA and the FBU negotiated an MOU, so a Memorandum of Understanding, and a framework for handling immediate detriment cases. And this was linked to the settlement of individual legal claims which had been taken against other authorities, not ourselves, but all fire and rescue authorities were asked to consider its adoption. And at the point of the generation of that MOU in the framework, it was LGA's understanding and our indications that the cost of implementing that framework, both in terms of the costs associated with kind of dealing with individuals, but also with the administrative costs, would be recovered through new burdens funding. And so principally, the MOU and the framework splits immediate detriment cases into 2 categories. And it provides a framework for fire and rescue services to deal consistently with both, avoiding further legal claims, but also accepting that there are real technical and practical difficulties with trying to resolve this. So in terms of the 2 categories, there is category 1, and that is those coming up to retirement before the legislation is in place, so before autumn 2023. And in all but a few circumstances, in effect, this repeats what the authority is already doing for staff as of the 1st of July, so following your meeting in June. So therefore, we are, as I say, all but in a few circumstances already operating what they are describing as Category 1. Category 2 refers to those people who have already retired and some other further ill health retirement cases. And those are the cases that the authority, following your discussion in June, are not yet processing. And we estimate that for this authority, that is around 30 people who are in the immediate detriment category for retirees. Those cases are the most challenging to remedy, because for those, it's not just about recalculating what their lump sum and pensions and contributions would be under the legacy scheme as opposed to the 2015 scheme. It is also trying to roll back for 7 years what that would have meant both for interest and personal tax situations and liabilities, and also revisiting what their decisions were at the time of retirement on lump sum. So I think you can get some indication of quite the level of complexity involved, in particular with Category 2 kind of cases. On those Category 2 cases in particular, the framework aims to provide us with assistance and guidance on how to deal with those ones, in particular for our administrators. And remembering that these are still being done manually because the software is also not anticipated to be in place until 2023. And in particular, for those tax and interest payments that I've spoken about there, the indication within the framework is that the Fire and Rescue Service will either directly pay those ones or will reimburse the individuals who pay those costs, and again with the expectation of the LGA at that point of writing it that those costs would be recouped to us later through new burdens funding. So in response to that MOU and framework, the technical working group, which I lead and has our administrators and payroll and also internal colleagues, worked positively and constructively on how to adopt that framework, recognising the importance of this to our staff, and also to run test cases. And through that, we identified that the biggest challenge are the timescales which are set out in the MOU. And the timescales in those MOU indicates that for all cases, so both for the Category 1 and the Category 2, which I've described, need to have estimates within 62 days, so around 2 months, of their application. So they apply to be considered for immediate detriment, and that triggers a process which gives them the estimates within 62 days. And that isn't just one estimate, it's an estimate of what they have currently got and what they would have got at those points as well. And that's irrespective of the complexity. And there are limited resources, both internally within Baines, and also therefore that was a considerable challenge, and not one that we felt that we could guarantee in all cases. But we continue to test and to try and run through that. The concern was that it was likely that when this was initially adopted in terms of the MOU, there could compound the issue, because the expectation was that, in particular, those Category 2 would submit an application either at the same or similar time, and therefore we would have a peak of Category 2, Category 1, and ordinary retirements all coming in at the same time and needing to be processed within that tight timescale. We also identified, as outlined in the paper, that the additional administrative costs, so you'll remember we spoke about the administrative costs of processing Category 1 at our last meeting. We worked those ones through and identified that the administrative costs of those Category 2 would be around $55,000. And that would be an additional burden on top of what we'd already agreed in June. But at that point, that looked as if it would be potentially manageable within our existing pension reserve, part of which we have put aside for immediate detriment. And again, on the understanding that we were looking that would be recouped. So we were working on that, and then the landscape became more complex as the government started to work through the technical matters on remedy, especially on tax. And the first thing which came through to us and was identified was that the recognised need to make late payments to the lump sum authorised. So at the moment, if somebody receives additional money into their lump sum after 12 months, there is what they call an authorised charge. So the government were looking at this as part of their kind of technical work on it, and they then produced a document which is also in your packet, Appendix 5, which raised an intent to make these payments authorised, and to do so with effect from the 6th of April 2022, which was positive in one respect, but hadn't been reflected in the framework and MOU, which was requiring us to pay that on behalf of the individuals or to repay them. And so what was also indicated was that if anyone processed retirees before that date and paid that charge, it was unlikely that the government would then reimburse us for that late payment charge. So we were working through that, as were the LGA and the FBU, when the HM Treasury identified more concerns in respect of the complexity around personal taxation. And again, there is a note of that in Appendix 7. And as a result of that, they raised particular concerns, and one of the examples there is around tax relief. And on that basis, advised not to process any immediate detriment cases before the legislation was in place. As I say, there was an indication there around tax relief, but also a concern about whether the Equality Act provisions around that could stretch as far as resolving the tax issues around immediate detriment. Followed very soon by that, the Home Office withdrew their previous guidance, and you'll recall that guidance informed your decision-making in June, and also confirmed that because they were withdrawing that guidance, they wouldn't be funding the additional cost of processing the immediate detriment cases outside of the pensions account. Now, our understanding of the pensions account is this is the account from which lump sum and retirement payments are made, and also employee and employer contributions. So what sits outside that, therefore, is the administrative costs and also the compensatory costs, which are, as I say, largely those costs which is compensating individuals or directly paying individuals for implications in terms of tax and interest. And as a result of that, the National Fire Chiefs Council issued the advice to hold or delay with immediate detriment processing. In recognition that that places all fire and rescue services in a difficult position, as Amanda indicated, the LGA are seeking legal and QC advice on this matter, clarification on the Treasury position, and also clarification in respect of the Home Office funding, all of which at this point remain pending. Across the services, from kind of informal kind of inquiries, some services are taking a range of different actions in respect of the current situation, including temporary cessation or not starting immediate detriment, adopting the MOU in full or part, or deferring the decision. So in the meantime, this is a difficult decision and a difficult sort of judgment for us in the Fire Authority to make, because there are a balance of both financial and legal risks involved here. There is a risk of legal claims of not proceeding with the MOU at this point, and legal claims are always costly, and it is also, there is no indication that those would be funded. And that's balanced against the costs of locally funding compensatory payments and admin costs, which are unlikely to be kind of recouped. And because in order to find out the quantum of those ones, you need to deal with each case on a case-by-case basis, we do not yet know what the quantum would be with that, and therefore whether it would be contained within our pension reserve. We are running a limited number of test cases, but we don't yet have the calculations kind of for you on those ones. We also recognise from the public access statement, which was submitted today, that this is a matter of great interest and concern to both our employees and the FBU, and in particular to our employees who are trying to make a decision at the moment on whether to retire based on estimates. People who have already retired, of course, have already made their decision based on previous estimates, although, of course, will then be impacted in one way or another when those are recalculated. So I think what I've tried to do in the recommendations that have been sort of redone for you in the absence of legal advice is try and tread a path which balances all of that for you. But I think before I move on to the recommendations, I will just go back to Amanda to talk more about the legal implications of that, and then perhaps return to me for the recommendations, and then I'll perhaps bring my sort of pension expert colleagues in, and then go back to member questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. So in terms of legal considerations, they are dotted throughout this report because it's hard to discuss the topic without touching on the legal considerations. So if I refer you first to page 337 of your bundle and paragraph 5.1 onwards, let me just remind you that you did receive detailed advice last time from Adrian Lynch QC, and he at that stage advised, I'm happy to say this in open session, that we as a fire authority he felt did have an arguable defence to any claim due to the continuing uncertainty about pensions, which was no fault of our own. So the fire authority was left in a position which was just not fair because of the lack of regulations from the government. However, he also recognised that you as a fire authority would want to support your employees, your firefighters, and start processing claims as quickly as you could. So he advised you to only process, to minimise your legal risk, the clearest and least controversial claims, and we set out that list that he recommended. So if you turn now to page 338 of your bundle, paragraph 5.4, I was asked probably a couple of weeks ago now whether we should go back and get some more legal advice at this stage, but it was very clear that the LGA, having negotiated this MOU and then had all the guidance withdrawn by the government, realised that they had to get some urgent advice about this and the implications on this MOU. So I considered there was no point us rushing off to get legal advice if we know legal advice is imminent, which has been requested by the LGA. So I determined let's not do that at this stage. I should highlight to you that your knowledgeable QC that you used last time has sadly passed away, so I would have to find you a new legal expert on this topic in any event. One of the things that I think I should quickly touch on is that the MOU and the framework proposes a new form that we haven't seen before, called a record of agreed compensation / remedy. And that basically is the form that you would ask a firefighter to sign in order to get his legacy scheme benefits. So what we've found in recent weeks is that firefighters are less willing to sign the COT3, the compromise agreement, which was advised by your QC to protect the firefighters' legal interests, and hoping that we would instead adopt this record of agreed compensation or remedy. Now, there is some legal advice about that, which is within your exempt paper, so I'm not going to talk about that in open session because it is exempt, that advice. So hopefully you've had a chance to read that. I'm going to give you my view for what it's worth. A COT3, the reason your QC recommended that you get a COT3 signed is it is legally binding on an employment tribunal because it is negotiated with the assistance of ACAS. So it's bulletproof, if I can put it that way. How does that differ from this new form that's been recommended and appendix to the MOU? In reality, not very much. The contents are pretty much the same, okay? It says, I accept this, I accept it's an imperfect solution, I accept that the pension regulations haven't been passed, I accept that my calculations may need to be redone, and so on. And it also agrees in return not to issue proceedings against us. So it pretty much says the same things. It just doesn't have the same legal status. I think the fire authority's risk in adopting that form are pretty low because I think a judge would want to take it into account in any claim, in any event, whether or not it's labelled a cot-free. Because what the judge would see is that an MOU was negotiated, that firefighters were advised by the FBU, and therefore I think a judge would feel that it was fair to take that document into account. So yes, it's not bulletproof. I can't guarantee to you that you won't be the subject of legal proceedings if that form is signed, but I don't think it's the end of the world if we stop using the cot-free, because I think we could still use it in evidence. Okay, so I just wanted to cover that. If I could then move on briefly to paragraph 7.1, so the legal section of the report, which is on page 341 of your bundle. What I think members should bear in mind when they're reaching their decision today is that since your decision on the 30th of June, the legal landscape has changed significantly, as outlined by Angie. And what I've tried to do for you is to summarise in bullet points what those key changes are. So we now have the MOU and framework, which was signed on the 8th of October. That resulted in the LGA producing various guidance documents, which are also referred to in the papers. We had an HMRC policy document issued on the 27th of October, and then we had an HM Treasury information note issued on the 29th of November. For me, advising you as your legal advisor, that was the most worrying document to read. And I've quoted from it. It included the words, therefore, HMT and HO, so Her Majesty's Treasury and the Home Office, do not advise that schemes process pipeline immediate detriment cases before the legislation is in place. And then obviously there was the withdrawal of the Home Office guidance. So I think we're in this difficult legal position where you're being told on the one hand, don't process cases, but if you don't process them, you might be the subject of legal claims by firefighters. So you're caught in almost an impossible situation. So the recommendations which Angie is now going to go through with you will look at really our best compromise that we're suggesting to you. And that is pretty much continue as we are, process cases, because we know they're going to have to be recalculated in any event. But don't, at this stage, adopt a document which we don't have advice on the implications. And we also don't have advice on whether we can partially adopt. Because what we wouldn't want to do is adopt something knowing the timescales can't be met. So that would be the worst thing. And dealing with that MOU, if I could refer you to paragraph 3.6, which is on the bottom of your page 328. I just wanted to highlight the status of the MOU. The MOU is not a legally binding document. It has no legal obligations or legal rights, and it actually says at paragraph 10.1, the parties enter into the MOU intending to honour all their obligations, and I emphasise the word all. It is between the FBU and the LGA. It's not between the FBU and individual firefighters. So it's for you to decide whether we want to sign up to this. But I would advise caution, because I don't think with the timescales that are set out in that document, you can honestly expect that we're going to honour all the obligations, because I just don't think that's physically possible. So I just highlight that for you so that you're aware of the status of the MOU. I hope that's helpful. So I'm just going to hand over to Angie now, who's going to run through our recommended compromise in terms of new recommendations, and then maybe we could have a proposer and seconder to propose those new recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So the amended recommendations which you have before you are, first of all, recommendation A is to note the MOU and framework for managing immediate detriment issues, Appendix 2, together with the LGA guidance, Appendix 3, and that exempt appendix which Amanda mentioned. To note the HMRC policy document, which is your Appendix 5, and the LGA response to that, which is at Appendix 6. The HM Treasury's information note, which is Appendix 7, and the Home Office communications at Appendix 8. And this is the section there with actually the recommendation about the kind of how we kind of go forward. So the recommendation there is to defer a decision on formally adopting the MOU until January, February, so kind of early in the new year, when further legal advice and clarification on funding is anticipated. But signpost a clear intention to our staff and also the FBU to adopt the framework as fully as is practically and financially possible once those clarifications are received. And in the interim, decide to continue processing immediate detriment cases for forthcoming retirees under the arrangements agreed in June 2021. And there, my rationale on those is to try and sort of weigh up all of these very difficult financial and legal risks. And also in terms of continuing to process immediate detriment for forthcoming retirees. As I say, those are the group who are currently making decisions on whether to retire or not on the basis of their kind of estimates. And also, because we don't have this very complicated compensatory element in their cases, the costs of processing those ones are better contained within the pension reserve and the GADMIN grant, which have already been put in place. The recommendation for D is to agree that because decision-making will need to be agile to respond to this fast-moving and changing advice, legislation and government policy, an extraordinary FAR authority may be necessary in January or February to further review the immediate detriment position and make sure that we are responsive in our decision-making to our staff. E is to instruct the pension administrators to run dual estimates for firefighters who have given notice to retire before the end of March 22. So we base those estimates on both the existing arrangements and the MOU, so that again we are agile and stand ready should we be able to decide to adopt the MOU in that January or February point. And linked to that, the recommendation also is to start to collate the information needed to run estimates under the framework for Category 2 cases in preparation for decisions in the new year. And this is also, again, enabling us to be agile, but also in preparing those now to try and smooth the peak that I discussed earlier, but also if we are then deciding to process those in the new year, and therefore any of those kind of unauthorised tax ones come in, they will be coming in after April 2022, which is where we've indicated the government changes with reference to those becoming authorised and therefore not chargeable. Recommendation F is to continue to publish notices in writing, advising members that they would be well advised to obtain their own financial and or legal advice regarding their decision in terms of their pensions. Recommendation for G is to delegate authority to the Chief FAR Officer to communicate the FAR Authority's decision to those impacted, retired and not retired, and work with the administrators and payroll to calculate and process immediate detriment payments in accordance with the FAR Authority's decisions. And H, continue to delegate to the Local Pensions Board oversight of the administration of immediate detriment cases with the LPB to refer the matter back as needed to the FAR Authority as the scheme manager. So those are the updated recommendations. I don't know if we need to go to secondary, but after that, with the permission of the Chair, I would like to, it would be good if we could invite our Chair of the LPB to give his technical kind of advice into this.
Can we just get those new recommendations proposed and seconded, please?
Right.
No,
Just go
not
for
at
that,
that
yeah.
stage.
Okay, so I will propose these recommendations. Do I have Dawn as a seconder?
Thank you. So if we could now, we'll hand over to Andy Cunningham, the Chair of the Local Pension Board.
Thank you. I'll just give a brief kind of overview of my sort of opinion on this. I think probably the first thing to highlight is you're in a difficult position here because obviously the 2015 reforms have been determined to be discriminatory, but then at the same time there's no retrospective remedy in place in law. So you have sort of compliance issues either way. The other thing I was just going to highlight was that the MOU was released before guidance was removed by government, and other things have happened since then, which I think are material sort of developments when considering whether to adopt the MOU to the things which have happened since then. Also, I believe the LGA sort of highlighted that they weren't almost aware that the guidance was going to be removed. It seemed that there wasn't a sort of communication there between the LGA and government departments. And because the legal position is unclear, I think my sort of recommendation almost would be that to take a prudent approach, and I think these recommendations that you have before you outline a sort of a sensible way forward in terms of waiting for the legal guidance that the LGA has commissioned, and then seeing what that says before making a decision. And hence, sort of the key one for me is probably C, which is deferring the decision.
Thank you, Andy. I think, unless Angie wants to add anything, we've probably exhausted all the information you probably need from this paper. So we'll stop talking.
Or we are exhausted.
Or we are exhausted, yes, that's the other option. So happy to take any questions. I'm aware that it's a horrible paper for you all to have digested, but happy to take any questions. And Jeff, sorry, I forgot to ask you, is there anything you would like to add before we do that?
Nothing to add, really. I mean, I completely agree with what the Pension Board Chair has said, and obviously with the recommendations put together by the Fire Authority for consideration today. So it's an extremely complex matter which has been made more complex by government intervention and then sort of retracting some of the information it provided in the first place. So a minefield, I'm afraid.
Thank you. I think minefield is very appropriate to sum this up. Adam, you had your hand up.
Thank you. So, we've been bombarded with information, and thank you for that. I meant that in the nicest way, because it clearly is a complex decision. So, around recommendation E, there would clearly be a cost involved in recommendation E, and so the questions, I'm sure you do know the answer, they're not complex, trust me. First is, do we know what that cost is approximately? And secondly, is that a cost that we are able to, I can't remember the phrase somebody used, but there's a phrase that we can subsequently go back to government to be reimbursed for that cost? So, do we know the cost of recommendation E? And B, is that a cost that we have to bear as a fire authority and will not ever see that cost reimbursed, or will we eventually be reimbursed for the additional cost?
So the additional cost with reference to so E is in two parts. So it's one about continuing to do the estimates for category 1, which isn't an additional cost to what we've already agreed in June. Starting to collate the information, so needed to run estimates, and there's a difference between collating the information and running the estimates. If we collated and ran the estimates, it would be the 55,000 administrative costs which are indicated in your paper, because the other costs come from actually the compensatory elements, which we wouldn't be doing without agreement to the MOU. So the 55,000, at the moment, we don't know whether that would be recouped or not. The indication from the Home Office one is potentially not, but we are seeking clarification on that one. But we have set aside for immediate detriment a pension reserve, which is indicated in your paper there, of 578,000. And that cost could be contained within that reserve in order to start to get ahead to process these ones. Remembering at some point in the future we will need to process these cases anyway. So it's trying to get ahead, albeit there is a decision point about when we actually enact payments for those individuals.
So I get that. So, but should somebody then want to move forward with the payment, then we've only got the 578. So then, if there is compensation, is the compensation within that 578 budget, or is that a separate budget? Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, it is confusing. So the proposal in here is not that we will start to enact payment for Category 2 cases at all, because that is the provision in the MOU, which, subject to your decision today, wouldn't be processed. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Councillor Goggin.
Thanks, and apologies. I was just wondering, we've heard Jeff's opinion, but I wasn't sure who he was representing.
I'm the Avon Pension Fund, Bath and North East Somerset, the scheme administrator.
Yeah.
So this is just a procedural question now, sorry. So is it possible, at the start of the meeting, there was a public access request, wasn't there? And I appreciate in normal circumstances that public access would have been public access. But are we allowed to have that public access wording reread to us just for consideration upon the vote?
Yes, happy to read that again. I realise it was read out quite some time ago, so it's relevant to these discussions. So it's signed by Amanda Mills, the Avon Fire Brigade Union Secretary, to whom it may concern. I'm writing support of the Agenda Item 13, Immediate Detriment, LGA and FBU Memorandum of Understanding and Framework Update. In 2018, the Fire Brigade Union won a legal victory over the discrimination contained within the arrangements for transition from the 1992 Firefighters Pension Scheme to the 2005 Care Scheme. Since this date, there have been a significant number of retirements due to age, length of service and ill health. These retired people have, in many cases, been on a much reduced pension due to the detrimental provisions of the 2015 Care Scheme when compared to the provisions of the 1992 FPS. The full legal remedy following the judicial decision may not be implemented until October 2023, when all mechanisms for pension calculation, etc., have been implemented. Due to this extended time period, the FBU has sought to expedite access to the correct pension on retirement prior to the full remedy date. This process is known as immediate detriment. This negotiation has culminated in the Memorandum of Understanding between the FBU and the Local Government Association. The FBU are seeking approval by Avon Fire Authority to adopt the MOU in full, to enable people to retire with their full entitlement. The withdrawal of the Home Office guidance has no impact on the MOU. We urge you to approve the MOU.
Okay.
If no one else got any questions, I promise it's not last question.
I'm sure I've asked this question before, so I understand we're effectively going to potentially accept to be in a holding pattern, and I understand why we would do that. If a member was to pass before the legislation catches up, clearly we would not be looking to leave any widow or widower financially out of pocket by accepting this holding pattern. I'm just looking for reassurance on that, because I wouldn't want any action we take deliberately leave somebody. I appreciate there's always consequences, but deliberately leave any one person.
I'm looking to Andy in case I get this wrong, but my understanding is that you remain in your pension as it is, as at the date you retire, then you elect which one you're going to take your benefits of. So I'm struggling a bit with the death in service, which ones would apply, because I know they're different between the two schemes.
This might be one better that Jeff answers, but I think I guess one of the difficulties you'll have is that you don't actually know what the retrospective remedy looks like in terms of how it corrects the pension legislation. It's probably not completely clear how it would apply, but based on my experience, you would expect that if you're doing a proper retrospective remedy, that you would go back and you would make sure that nobody was worse off because of the timing. So that would be my complete expectation, because otherwise I think I would argue it's not really a proper retrospective remedy if somebody is worse off because of the timing. Because I think that's the key point here is that it's really about the timing of when you remedy. It's not about whether you remedy or not. And really the dispute, if that's the right word for it, between maybe the idea of doing the MOU early or later is really about timing.
Did you want to add anything to that, Jeff? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I think that's pretty much the same. I agree with that. It's around the timing issue. So at the end of the day, the legislation will come into being. It will become regulation, and at that time, then if we are looking at a particular death case, death in service, let's say, or death of a retired member who fell into that immediate detriment, that period of time which we are looking at through the MacLeod Sergeant issue, then we would look to ensure that the member or the dependents wouldn't be disadvantaged through the process.
I don't know if that's totally given you the reassurance you want. Are you happy?
I'm not being offensive at all. It hasn't, but I didn't expect to get guarantees because there aren't guarantees available in the situation we're in.
We do have, before the next Fire Authority meeting, there is a local pension board meeting in the diary. So I wonder whether we take it away as something for them to have a look at, death in service generally related to the immediate detriment issue, so that we can get a bit of comfort for the next meeting.
I'm happy to do that, Amanda, but I think also just to kind of state it in such specific and sad circumstances, I've got the confidence that we would come back to the Fire Authority or the LPB with those specific circumstances and make sure that the right and appropriate decision, stretching as far as we could with what is legally in place, would be taken at that point.
Yeah, I'm not trying to imply anyone's not going to do the right thing. I was just looking for there to be some public recognition that people recognise there is that need.
I could personally guarantee you would do the right thing, Councillor.
So in relation to the amended recommendations, which you have in your separate sheet, do you need those read out again, or are you happy to have a proposer and seconder and then vote on those recommendations? Okay, so shall we have the same proposer? So Brenda and Don as proposer and seconder. So any votes against, please? Any abstentions? So I take that as carried. Thank you very much, members. Thank you. Thank you, Angie, for your help.
Yeah, thank you everybody who's been involved in this. It's such a difficult subject. And just as an example of how confusing people are finding it, I actually had a firefighter who was retiring phone me to say, did I have any advice? At which point I said, absolutely none. I haven't got a clue. I'm really sorry. I think he got satisfied. He must have obviously contacted somebody after that. But yes, not an easy subject, this one. Right, did we actually vote then? We did. It's been a long afternoon. I'm trying to remember where I am. Right. Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you for coming. We're managing to move on to item 14, Financial Planning Framework, and 2022-23 budget setting. And the Treasurer, I believe, is going to talk to this.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm pleased to say I think this paper might be slightly less complex than the previous paper. So on that basis, I will move forward and give you the headlines. So this paper is found on page 370 of your pack. And the summary is to give members an overview of the financial planning framework, to also outline the Fire Authority's statutory requirements, and it also gives a high-level overview of the devolved budget framework, which I touched on in my revenue paper, so I won't touch on again in this paper. And the recommendation is to ask the Fire Authority to approve the methodology and assumptions outlined in this report, and to receive the draft annual budgets and pre-SAP in February 22. So on that note, the financial planning framework is identified on page 371, and the Fire Authority is required to report a 22-23 annual budget, a 4-year medium-term financial plan, a 3-year capital strategy, a reserve strategy, and a treasury management strategy. So just a few strategies, financial strategies, to proceed in the new year. The statutory requirements are outlined in section 5.2 on page 371, and there are 2 statutory requirements. The first is to approve the final precept by the 1st of March and inform our unitary authorities. And the second statutory requirement is to undertake consultation with the business community. In section 5.2, I've outlined the partners that we've undertaken our consultation with last year. I've been asked this year to add a partner by one of our Fire Authority members, and that's the Federation of Small Businesses. So that organisation will be included in this year's consultation. Just to reassure members, although our statutory requirement is consultation with the business community, we also include the consultation on our website for the members of our public. Thank you. So the methodology and assumptions are outlined in section 5.3. I won't run through those. I'm hoping that members have read and digested that information. And the key priority is to support the delivery of the service plan and the IRMP. The timetable is shown in Appendix 1. And I would just update one date there, which members have approved earlier today, which is this timetable included the extraordinary Fire Authority meeting in February, on the 23rd of February, and members have agreed that that will be moved to the 28th of February.
I think we're talking about different Februaries. This is February this financial year. The forward plan report was the following one, 2023.
Okay, thank you. Also, just to make members aware that myself and the Head of Finance will undertake a members' briefing on the 21st of January, and we will talk members through the draft annual budgets, including the precept and the key financial risks. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from anybody? Can't see anyone.
It was just the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Do you want to propose?
Yeah. I'll propose any seconder. Oh, lots of seconders, yeah. So I'll take Adam this because he's been asking lots of questions. Okay, in that case, can I see anybody against the proposal? No. Any abstentions? No. So that is passed. Right. Item 15 on the agenda is an information item. And is that Steve? Are you going to be doing that one? Right. Thank you.
Yes, it is, Chair. So as the Chair has just said, this is a standing agenda item for information only, and the report is for noting. The service roundup covers a period from between September and November this year. I would just like to highlight a couple of the areas of good work within the report. Section 5.2 to 5.3 on page 376 outlines our ongoing work with the Building Risk Review Programme. Members have been keeping pace with that throughout the year. We're coming to the end of year deadline now that was set nationally, and for reassurance, although in the paper it makes reference to 75% completion rate, we have currently at 100% completion rate a month ahead of the deadline. We're just now going through a quality assurance process of the information that we provided back into the centre. So it's a bit of good news in that regard for the service. Section 5.8, page 377, that notes our new partnership with the Prince's Trust, working with the Get Started in Fitness programme. The first cohort of young people attended the course for a week at Yate Fire Station, where they not only got education and input on health and well-being, but also wider life skills such as resilience, communication, teamwork, and the like. It was the first one we've been part of as a service. There was about six to eight attendees, but it's looking very positive now for future events going into next year. A third area that I'd like just to mention with members, again, it shows the breadth of good work that goes on in the service, not only for our day-to-day duties, but also the voluntary aspects of working. Section 5.12 and 13 summarises a charity event organised by Crews to commemorate the 20th anniversary of 9/11. 30 members of staff from right across the service come together on a weekend to undertake an equivalent climb of the Twin Towers' 110 stories of the World Trade Center for 102 minutes, which was the length of time that the first aircraft crashed into the first tower to the second tower collapsing. In total, over £4,500 was raised by colleagues across the service. It has been donated to the firefighters' charity. And finally, section 5.27 on page 379 summarises how crews have recently, or within the time frame in the report, utilised the drone, new technology that the Fire Authority have invested in. There was a report of a missing person in the Portbury area, and following a manual search by colleagues in the emergency services, were unable to locate the individual. So they requested our assistance, and we employed the drone with crews from Portishead, used its thermal imaging technology to locate the individual. They were called up on a very early, dark, wet morning in September, and then we deployed our swiftwater rescue crews to effect the rescue. So a really positive note of the investment made by the Fire Authority in the new technology that we're employing. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions on the paper, but as the Chair has referenced, it is for noting.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think the climbing the stairs in Ashton Gate was phenomenal. I did see if I could come along to cheer you on, but I was told no. So, but it was really good. And I think the other thing that stood out, has probably had the most attention recently, was the lorry going into the harbour in Bristol, which was quite spectacular from the look of the film. So, yeah. Yeah. Don?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody. Item 5.11 on young fire setters. Where can we get more information about that, please? And clearly, I suspect quite a lot of suffer from motorbikes being set on fire by peoples unknown and other matters. It'd be useful to get more information.
Yes, certainly, Councillor. If you'd like to send me a list of the type of information required, and I'll circulate it to members accordingly.
Thank you, Chair. We had a very sad incident in Bath, as I think everybody is aware of, and I was very grateful for the very thorough briefing we were given on that. It must have been very difficult for everybody concerned. One thing I did wonder a little bit about, I think there were appliances from 4 different stations sent to that. I mean, it is, in fact, I think the location is only about a quarter of a mile from Bath, where there are 3 appliances. I'm just wondering if anybody cares to comment on how that situation occurred. Were you particularly stretched at that point? One was
no, Councillor. The standard predetermined attendance for that incident was deployed. and you're quite right, it's only a couple of minutes around the corner from the fire station, but due to the nature of the incident and the information we had on the caller, that was the reason that the officer in charge increased the attendance to help deal with the incident.
Any other comments? Paul?
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. Great work. I noticed in the news that there was a e-scooter fire on Gloucester Road. I think they've withdrawn all the Devolved scooters now from Bristol, or at least from people from keeping them in their own home, because there was a problem with a lithium battery or something. But I think you guys attended and dealt with that and the hazardous materials contained therein. But I mean, obviously that's a new issue that you may or may not have to deal with over Christmas.
Lithium-ion batteries are an emerging risk for us, both in vehicles and in obviously smaller devices that people use to get around. So it's something that's in the proposals for our new service plan in terms of how do we deal with that risk, because putting a fire out in a lithium-ion battery is really significant. It takes an inordinate amount of water in order to quench that fire, because even if you've cooled it, it continues to provide an exothermic reaction and will provide heat, which will then reignite. So it's an ongoing issue for us. We will be looking at this in terms of investing in technology to enable us to deal with them better. It just needs a lot of water at this moment in time. We are alive to the fact that there are different products on the market now which use those lithium-ion batteries from small electrical devices right up to quite large vehicles. So yeah, we're alive to it, and it's something that will, as time goes by, we will need to develop our operational response capabilities to deal with these incidents in the best way we can.
Anybody else? No, don't think so. In that case, we can move on. Item 16 is the date of the next extraordinary meeting, which I think we've already mentioned, and the venue is Bradley Stoke Jubilee Centre. So I don't know where that is, but I'm sure we'll find it. So that completes that. Item 17 is exclusion of the press and public, and I want to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business on the grounds that they contain exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972. The public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Thank you. So, yeah, I'll propose that. Can I have a seconder? Dawn? Right, and I think the filming's finished.